is, it's a change for us.
Exciting. Okay, great.
Bringing dynamism, great.
Dynamism. All right, we are live, folks. Would you like to take it away, Grug?
Oh, and yeah, good morning. Welcome to another Glasshouse session. Today, we are honored to have Katie joining us. Katie is an expert on pretty much everything cyber. She's been in InfoSec longer than even I or Dave has, which is spectacularly amazing. Not by much, mind you. So anyway, we're very pleased to have Katie joining us. We also have Pablo, and if Mike figures out how to get his potato connected to the internet, he'll be joining us as well. As usual, we've got Jags, Dave Itel, and myself. I mentioned Pablo, I'm sure I did, but yes, we also have Pablo. So today has sort of culminated a week of fairly exciting stuff, but unfortunately for a show dedicated to Ukraine-Russian cyber warfare, there has not been very many cyber warfare events to talk about.
It's not entirely devoid of warfareness, or actually of cyberness, but yes.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna run through. Someone is going to put the notes document up. Dave is right. There's a lot of stuff. Okay, so there's the Venezuelan doctor who, I've got some words on that, who ended up becoming a ransomware guy. There's one Sandworm Ukraine. Oh my God, we've lost Katie and we've gained a cat. This is awesome.
Happy.
Let's see if we can do that with Dave now.
Yeah.
He's a part of this now.
This is perfect.
Excellent. So joining us on the panel is Scappy. Okay, so there's the Ministry of Truth. There's a new book that's out, and there's some cool Chinese espionage and Bluetooth stuff, probably a whole bunch of other stuff, but I think...
But we already forgot. Like, there's been so much bullshit that we have forgotten already.
Somehow I managed to do a newsletter full of like 10 things every single day, and at the end of the week, I'm like, did anything even happen? So anyway, Dave just mentioned in the chat over here that one of the cool things that happened was today, Costa Rica declared that they are at war with Conti, which, I mean, I'm not sure which way I'm going to bet on that one, but I think Conti kind of has a better odds, shall we say?
So I had a conversation about this with a wonderful reporter at the New York Times, Kate Conger, who was working on the story, and we were like just kind of trying to game out, what the hell's going to happen or what's happening with this Costa Rica situation. And like, I think the main thing that's kind of really bogging things down is that they have the Ministry of Finance, so it's basically like you have like the IRS locked up and exfiltrated. Now, what I'm wondering is, to what extent are they logistically fucked versus to what extent is there just a lot of information that if and when it gets out will just destabilize this country? Like, I don't want to assume Costa Rica is like any of the South American countries that I'm familiar with, but usually if you get a giant dump of stuff, like, you can find 12 different ways that one of those governments should go down. And I'm wondering what situation are we dealing with here? Is this really just like our tax system isn't working right, or are we,
So like, one of the things I saw is that because their financial system is down, civil servants are not going to get automatic transfers. They're not getting paid. So if they want to get paid, they have to submit manually in writing their, I guess, invoice for their work time, and then they're going to get like a check written for them. Like, it seems, like it seems basically like, sorry, people are just calling me an idiot in chat and they're being correct. Yeah, no, like it does seem that Costa Rica is doing fairly poorly, like in general, not just
not handling the situation super well. Is that what you're? I mean, look at Peru on the other side, right? Like Peru had their intelligence agency popped, I think by Conti as well. I've been like waiting, I hope they resolve the situation, but I'm also sitting in the back, like just like if those docs come, like I'm curious.
Well, here's the thing, right? If they've done Peru, Costa Rica, if they can hit like say Venezuela, maybe Colombia, we could look at having a coalition of Latin American countries invading Russia.
The least suited for any kind of like, as long as if it's winter, they're fine. Like there's no way that people with Dave's tan are gonna function well invading Russia in winter. Like just
straight to Siberia.
This is a huge lost opportunity, right? I mean, it's if Conti had their act together and some sort of plan, right, and some sort of physical presence, taking down a government like this is how you attack legitimacy, right? This is how your insurgency gets to take over. I don't know if you've paid attention to the last a country called Iraq in the last 20 years, but when you don't do nation building, someone's going to do that for you, right? And suddenly you can't figure.
George Bush talked about this recently.
Yeah,
so so they could be taking over countries. They could be, just taking it down. What's the point, right?
Wait.
You should have some other kind of goal, as opposed to unless we're following Greg's sort of scorched earth, or I'm just going to run through the internet and tear shit down, and I don't care who it hurts, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm just going to start where it's easy, like Central America. So,
well, we always talk,
Katie.
but we always talk about how the missed opportunities of people who have owned things, like what we would do if we sat in their position, and they always disappoint us with coin miners. So like, I don't know why we're expecting any differently here.
That's a perfect point. Yeah, the Twitter hack was one. I think Katie's completely right on this one too. I think this is precisely the thing to bring up whenever people talk about Conti as an arm of the Russian government. Like, it is definitely a tool in the quiver. It's an arrow.
They are
tools.
But
they're definitely tools, but like I'm saying, it's definitely not that coordinated, right? Like there are definitely strategic targets they could be hitting. This is just an affiliate that's decided like, oh, they do have money in Latin America. Let's maybe try that route as well.
Okay, so a couple of thoughts, right? The first one is with the whole like knocking off legitimate governments. Listen, Russia's getting their butt kicked by the Ukraine, and the Ukraine's next door and has no navy. I don't think they're ready to take on, Argentina or Brazil. So start with that, right? Second of all, there's kind of like this cost benefit analysis of, if you're Conti, how much can you get away with without really drawing the ire of the world, right? And as we found out with a colonial pipeline, there's really a very thin margin there of we can get away with this and not get away with that. I guarantee you that if they were getting into the business of destabilizing governments, the US and the West would really hone in on that, and they would cease to exist as a tool.
Well, they don't like people sort of taking their job from them, That's, immigrants coming over here and stealing our nation.
Exactly. We're real concerned about white people fighting white people.
No, but Cryptominers is like, to Katie's point, it's kind of one of those things where you go, oh, God, really? This is just a nuisance. Like nobody's gonna go to war over this, right? Like nobody's gonna scream or send to marshes over
But
this.
it's the ultimate below the threshold. It's below the threshold of even anyone on this call giving a shit. Like it's the perfect crime, right? Like the UFC can put Cryptominers in their streams because we're all like, really? But whatever,
Didn't Norton Antivirus do that?
Right. So, I mean, I think here's a thing as well. Like, I talk about it a lot with other things of like, you shouldn't divorce cyber from strategic context, right? Like cyber, when it's done by a nation state, is not done because it's there. It's done because it's achieving something for them. And I think it's worth keeping that in mind when we're looking at criminals, because, I don't think Conti is into taking over states. I think they're into making money. So yeah, it's a missed opportunity in terms of like what they could do, But what they do is they make money by extorting people. Like that is their thing. You know, like we're not going to be seeing them doing something really spectacular and different because they just want their money. Like that's all
I don't know, man. Why not extort a whole country, right? Like if you're Conti, right? Like what's the difference between a company and a country if you're Conti?
No,
Like,
I agree.
it
with
seems
you.
like the next step.
It's fine. It's just they're not going to do it for like Costa Rica. We will let you go as long as you use your UN vote to endorse proposition blah blah. Like they're not going to do something like that because they want $10 million instead.
Well, I guess here's what I'm saying is like, you don't have to, we get very constrained in our thinking in terms of what ransomware really can do and is. And like, maybe what they really want is like a continual income stream, right? Like, I think it's great that they're thinking small, but we are also thinking small as to what they can do to make money. And right now it's like, please give me Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean that that's what it's always going to be.
Right. Well, so I wrote a paper on this, which I'm fairly certain I put out. And one of the things I point out is that ransomware is basically, it's a means of turning the owner of data into your agent. So you become like a principal agent setup where you have your desires and you task them to the agent, and then they, in theory, do what you want, even though you have, you know, different goals. Typically what you want is for them to go and buy Bitcoin and send it to you. Right, that's what they have been doing primarily, but it doesn't need to be that. Like once you have the ability to control an agent, you can make them do whatever you want. And it's again, it's not about encrypting the data. It's about having access and control over that data. You know, that's what gives you the leverage over them. So that's why leaking works, and that's why, you know, destroying it works and encrypting it works and all the stuff is. Access to data is what gives you power. So yeah, like we tend to think very, very narrow on what ransomware is, but in principle, it's like, it's the ability to turn someone who owns data that you can now control into an agent who will do whatever you want.
So it's like a subscription to protection money. It's a subscription service.
Yeah. It's a nice racket.
And without giving Mike more nightmares, I think we're also a little bit restricted in the mechanism of this whole process, because it very realistically is not just about encrypting data or even data itself. It is almost certainly more about access than data.
I'm going to stop a decently flowing conversation for a bit to address the reality of our guest, who is not just with Scappy, but also on her phone because the computer's not working. So we can't have our internal chat going, which to me, like the most important thing here is like, Katie, you very much get a disproportionate like focus of the stage, but we haven't been able to just like solicit your topics, like what you would like to talk about this week. So like, fucking knock us over the head with what you want to talk about and like derail the call in your direction, please.
Well, I figured you guys would run out of steam on this one, honestly, minutes and minutes ago. So I was happy to entertain this dude because Scappy the cat, you know, he's a dumb fuzzer and he's very old, which is why he gets to interrupt anything he wants. He's like 17 years old. But no, I mean, I don't need to talk about Scappy. I just figured you guys would, you know, run out of steam on that one. I didn't get to look at the show notes beforehand. What are some of the things that you guys wanted to bring up and talk about? I mean, we could talk about the DOJ making it more clear that hackers who be up to maybe marginal mischief will get off and not be prosecuted.
So that was topic number one. You have actually nailed. I have a feeling you could predict half of the doc. That is topic number one. I am super curious about that, like, because it feels like an overture in the right direction, but
yeah.
I'm also like, who's gonna try? Like, who's gonna test this one out? Who feels comfortable enough being like, let's poke the bear?
I think we've all been trying. We've all been trying very hard, you know, but I don't know. Some reporters were trying to get in my DMs and ask me like what I thought about it and everything. And would this affect me as a researcher, like in my approach? And I'm like, you know, it would really take a special kind of courage for someone to go after me specifically for CFA. But I'm just saying, like, probably don't go after like someone who co-authored the international standard on how to do vuln disclosure. Like it's a bet. I mean, they can, but I'm pretty sure I would have been following that standard like the whole time. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know that it's going to change a lot of people's behavior. I think we all have been testing the limits for quite some time, but I think what it indicates is something I've known about this DOJ and you know, the DOJ has lineage that permeates multiple administrations, right? So you don't get an all whatever today's administration is DOJ. You get pieces, parts, you know, that span multiple administrations. So I've just known that the core DOJ that has been in charge of prosecuting these kinds of cases for a very long time has been, you know, coming to Black Hat and saying, we come in peace. And here's like the very, you know, the reality is that at the federal level, we do very few prosecutions and we use some pretty good discretion. So I know they've been wanting to clarify, but that's where they are, is within their power to clarify. That's as far as they can go. What Congress needs to do is actually put safe harbor language into the law and modify the law. So we're at a good, you know, this is a good step in the right direction, but you know, until you actually change the letter of the law, a DOJ in the future could crumple it up and be like, actually, we hate hackers and we're going to come after every single one of you.
That's why I said it the way I did, right? Because I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, so can I start like popping panels for like obviously bad shit and just trying to help? Like, okay, let's put a concrete example on this, right? We've been talking about ransomware. Tomorrow I find a vulnerability in Conti's command control, and I can get in and get all the decryption keys for all of their current victims, including Costa Rica, right? That is something that isn't beyond the pale. It isn't like unheard of, but
it's like what the FBI did before with Revil.
But that's the FBI, right? Like if I do that to Revil and then
I
call the FBI,
so you don't have to either.
Right. But my point being, like, can I change my behavior at this point, right? Like, I get creds for accounts that are being used for exfil, for example. I don't access them. I would love to. I'd love to see what's in them, right? But technically, legally, I'm not supposed to. It is good faith research. It is. I have no intention of using it for anything bad. I want to inform victims, but
two things that were pointed out to me by lawyers who were in my mentions. One was that this is only federal and it doesn't cover state, and it also doesn't cover civil. So you can still get sued. So even if the feds go, that wasn't hacking, your local Florida state might decide to go after you because you broke something as far as they're concerned, and it has no bearing on that. And even one of the victims might decide to sue you. So, like, as Katie says, this is like, it's a great gesture from like the top dog, but it doesn't actually change anything realistically, because yeah, like the letter of the law needs to change.
Well, I do think it does change things realistically, because at the federal level, that does send a signal, because the federal CFAA was the first of the laws in this country. The state laws followed, and they were modeled after some like bastardized version of the federal. And so I think it does do something. It's not like a nothing gesture. And I think the most important thing that it clarifies, and what they talked about, is that research for algorithmic bias and like racial bias in algorithms, that is no longer the whole like, you violated the terms of service, I'm going to charge you with a CFAA violation. That is absolutely not going to work. So that does something super, super important. And, you know, I mean, there's our kinds of research, which is like on the mischief level usually, but then there's, you know, this whole body of that important research on algorithms and algorithmic bias that now, I mean, they can create test accounts and deceptively, you know, make themselves different races in their profiles to test algorithmic bias and you know, racial and gender bias, et cetera. So anyway, it's progress. But yeah, I would love if there were congressional appetite to make this change. Usually though, you have to be careful what you wish for. As soon as you open the door to congressional or to changes in the law, one, they might not change it the way you want it. The only time in my recollection that CFAA was changed in our, collective adult memory was punishments were increased. So like it went from like 5 years to 10 years on certain things, and cloud computing was more crisply defined to basically make it worse, for sentencing purposes. So yeah, the CFAA did get modified badly, but I think, yeah, we should be careful about trying to push on that, but that would be the next right move is get it changed in Congress, and try to carefully keep it from changing in ways we don't like.
That's the scary part, right? Like, do we want to ask them to really change it? Because you're like, you never know if these guys are just going to make it.
We would need a pack basically to and a lobbying group to start pushing like the policies that we want. And we have seriously time with Watson-R itself. So
a new president of the United States, I'm just saying, I think executive orders can really take us far. That's my plan.
They can.
Tell you what, if they have an all-electronic election, I guarantee you're going to do really well.
The only thing I would push back on that you said, Katie, is in the past, I agree that state laws tend to follow the federal act, but we seem to be in this time where states are going, you know what, we don't like the federal law, so we're just going to make up our own state law that is, heads in completely the opposite direction.
Yes. Yeah, we have seen some radical state extremist legislation. Say no more. I feel you on that one.
That's my fear.
Will we have
simple one being that? Sorry to interrupt you, Katie. Just from the chat because you can't see it. The simple one being the guy that did inspect Element on a website and reported it, and I think it was Missouri, Dave, that wanted to prosecute this reporter.
Yeah.
So Katie, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that state of Missouri was special. That was special. But no, I mean,
that was a state thing as well. So this wouldn't apply, right?
Right. This is not guidance that the state necessarily would take into account. They might. Certainly the defense attorneys would. They'd be like, look, at the federal level, this case is bullshit, so. But yeah, much like, trying to obtain healthcare if you have a uterus in Texas, I don't think it carries very much water.
On that note,
stunned silence on this call. I've never
disappointed silence for the first time ever.
I've never witnessed this. That's amazing.
We're actually trying to arrange a special lineup of guests to talk about just that subject. Well, not necessarily just that subject, but to have a panel that is less.
I think what the Grug is struggling to say is that after the last manel where we suddenly stumbled on the topic, we figured out maybe we should just give a whole session over to the right people to discuss this thing and let them have the whole stage.
Yeah, I gave you some suggestions for that
Please.
panel. Yeah.
You've seen what the organization looks like on the inside now. This call didn't exist 45 minutes ago, so you understand that, organizationally we're a shit show, but if you could help us, that would just be fantastic.
No more unpaid labor for women. I'm sorry. That was enough. So anyway, back to the topics at hand though, that remember what I told you when you asked me about that. I said, yeah, you should get people who talk about that all the time. Not me. I talk about nerd stuff,
here.
National security. Yeah. Let's talk about nerd stuff and national security.
Thank you.
Yes.
So topics that have been left.
That you would bring it up, Katie. You've betrayed the trust that we placed in you.
A very important point. States' laws are not necessarily going to follow federal. We know this.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good example.
So don't start popping shit and telling everybody that you've been doing it, just like has been happening for the past however long. Unlike this Venezuelan doctor who apparently was advertising.
That was smooth as fuck, man.
Advertising his side hustle in ransomware.
I feel like you could have used that transition for, and now a word from our sponsor, which by the way is still me. I am the only person who's ever did a sponsorship of any of you on this thing.
That's only 3 times, okay, which that's 3 times more than anyone else, but
getting back to I'm sorry. Go on with that the smooth voice.
No, the smooth voice transition was just trying to get us
we're on
onto
the
the
subject
topic.
of ransomware in Venezuela doctors. Tell us more about Luta Security.
And now a word from your
From our
sponsor.
sponsor.
I understand that you're involved in. Sorry.
No, we can talk about my Black Hat talk that just got accepted later. But let's talk about the doctor, the ransomware.
I have to talk about the doctor because he goes back to 1997 when he was in HCU, the Higher Cracking University, and I used to be in that as well, which makes it very, very amazing. But yes.
Can you fill us in? Like, some of us read the indictment and they didn't give us all this wonderful backstory on how you and the doctor used to hang out.
I didn't know about him at all. I had to go back and find one of the old archived websites. And yeah, he's got a bunch of tutorials and like they're reasonably advanced and fairly well written. I mean, for the time. Reverse engineering and cracking software. So he had one on defeating CD-ROM checks where like there's a check to see if there's a CD-ROM actually in the drive. And so he had a thing on like how to bypass that. He had another one on how to bypass dongles, I think, and one on how to use a particular piece of software from the time. So
the doctor was legit. Like,
oh yeah. Like he's like old school, like proper old school.
wow.
Like I was really surprised, like seeing that. Like I'm reading it, and it's like, and he used to be part of HCU, and I'm like, huh, there was another HCU? That's amazing. And it's like blah, 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 blah. Fravia is like, no fucking way. No, I don't believe it. So yeah, like back in the day, there used to be a thing, it was run by a guy called Fravia. He died of throat cancer like 15 years ago now.
Oh my God,
but
that long. Jesus, really?
Yeah, it
wow.
was like 2008 or so. So it's been ages. But yeah, so the thing was like he used reverse engineering and that to like try and get people to pay more attention to just the universe and the world and how it worked. He did a lot of stuff that was, I argued with him and said it was just semiotics, and you could like, instead of reading these dumbass fucking essays written by like high schoolers, you could just read like the first chapter of a college textbook on semiotics. And he told me you should write an essay. I'm like, what? Did you not hear what I just said? But yeah, so like I used to be in HCU. This guy was apparently in HCU. It's fucking really weird. He obviously, went another path in life, and he ended up doing this ransomware stuff for not very much money, to be honest. But
well, in Venezuela, that's a very different thing, right? Like, I will also say I know nothing about this person's life. I knew even less than I thought I did before you started that, Grug. And frankly, like, I'm also not super surprised that a doctor, no matter how well intentioned in Venezuela, might suddenly decide to turn to cybercrime. Like, they don't even have the materials to do any doctoring down there. So, I'm not saying the side hustle is the right thing to do, but knowing that, you had those skills just sitting around, it falls into place. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting as well that there's, like, I wonder if there's a nexus on this. Is there like a ransomware nexus outside Russia and like the former Soviet bloc? Have we just missed it, that there's like people in like, yeah, like there's DPRK and whatever, but like, are there more Venezuelans? Like, how many cardiologists?
There's a lot of Venezuelans.
More than one.
Definitely a few. There's a lot of them here in Miami with
Google
David
that.
and I too. Well, so Venezuelans, I mean, it's a highly educated population. They used to have a much higher standard of living 20 years ago, when it was actually probably the most developed, arguably the most developed nation in South America at the time, where like everybody was educated at Harvard and Georgetown and whatever, and those people went back to their country and established institutions and so on. I would imagine that there's a fair swath of well-educated curious folks who are not loving their lives there right now, who were not able to get out, who may be involved in some of this stuff. But I'm not the soothsayer of, you know, underground hacker cultures in particular localities. If anything, I think Dave would probably be the one like running some kind of hypergraph analysis on how these people communicate, and he's been oddly fucking quiet this whole time.
Well, I do think that there's an aspect of, I think, an interesting, if you torture a country enough, you get ransomware out of it, maybe. Like, and you could probably put a metric on that, right? Like, because I think one of the key strategic things I've learned over the past 5 years is we need to stop pretending that there's not a bunch of really good hackers everywhere else in the world, right? Like, so I just like to drill that home, which means, yeah, there's a bunch of really good Venezuelan hackers, right? There's a bunch of really good Chilean hackers. There's a bunch of really good hackers in all sorts of places.
When did the NSA give Chile, Venezuela, and these other places any of that technology? I don't know.
Right? I know. It must all come from.
How can you forget the Argentinian hackers? They will never let you forget them. So come on.
As someone who was born there, I got to say I'm horrified that none of you brought that up ahead of time. So here's a fun question, right? So Jags and I can convince you about this a little bit, right? So if you traveled overseas, right, in the 70s, most people's side hustles was making counterfeit American goods, right? Whatever that was. In the 80s, it was pirating software, right? Is this the new version of that? You know, running a ransomware side hustle if you're overseas.
What's the drawback?
No,
Like,
that's exactly it.
Running it, being an affiliate, I think, is the easy one, right? Running it needs.
I would go backwards. I think I have the opposite opinion of that, Grug. I think if you have the skills to dev, being the one deving the ransomware and doing the support, and then letting a bunch of idiots do the actual campaigns, as in the affiliates, and just pay you a percentage for your support, like that's passive income, bro. Like, you know, that's what the YouTube finance people tell you to do.
I have been
There's more idiots than our skilled people. So
I have been working for the last 2 years, trying to help raise people up above the security poverty level. But I think this conversation has made me want to change the definition of the security poverty level and just train people how to do ransomware, because that's clearly going to put more money in their pockets and elevate people up to where we want them to be.
You see, we finally stopped our Western-centric approach to helping people. The security poverty level is at about $2 a day. Okay,
that's the thing, man.
I'm calling more of an adopt a hacker situation.
I'm calling Greg Newmark as soon as this is over.
Ransomware. That's the thing.
Well, there's something to it. I mean, look, we have started talking about ransomware exclusively when it's targeted ransomware for enterprises, because that's where you get the 7-figure demands. But you're forgetting about the part where it was just a bunch of spammers trying to get somebody to click on, you know, bill.zip and ask for $300 in Bitcoin. And $300 in Bitcoin in Venezuela goes a long fucking way. Whereas, like, yeah, it also keeps you below the threshold of anybody caring, unless you're supplying Iran, unless you're hitting ASIS, right? So there is definitely a below the threshold side to ransomware, which is the stuff that's not coordinated, that's opportunistic, that's small demands that you call the FBI local office and they tell you to, like, good luck.
Yeah, so that's probably why he got in the most trouble, was he was like using, you know, sort of Iranian customer success as like a selling point and be like, look, great success, you know? And whoever was watching him was like, not cool. No, you can no longer have your side hustle.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of a lesson there as well. It's the like you can do whatever you like as long as it doesn't make the US angry, and like siding with their enemies makes them angry and they're going to come after you. So as long as you don't do that, you can get away with this for a long ass time. And
we circle back to the Conti discussion. Right? You can get away with anything as long as you don't make the US and Western nations angry.
At what point do they just have a merger? They decide like to turn it into Conti Rica. They're gonna make it a safe harbor for ransomware people to just like all the ransomware operators can go live in Costa Rica, in Conti Rica now. Safe harbor. You just, you know, pummel every other country. You pay a small tax, you know, 3% of your gains in Bitcoin.
Can we just create a virtual country in our own Bitcoin then at that point?
No, they just like, mint NFTs with themselves as ape. Like, that's the currency. That's it.
That'll replace stamps. That's how they can make them.
Yeah, legal tender there.
Now, if we can just AI and ML all of that, we'll be set. We'll hit the triumvirate of cybers.
Don't give away all the ideas. Like we're almost at RSA, bro. Like you're not gonna get your investment if you just give it away to all of our 46 viewers.
Yeah, no, they're tearing up their like marketing glossies for RSA in tears right now because of this. This is it. We ended the career.
That's right.
Multi-million-dollar campaigns just
being completely
Ludasec will be putting out bingo cards for RSA with all the buzzwords. They'll be selling them in packs.
I think we're going to see Conti Rica show up in media at some point, and they're not going to cite us. They're just going to.
Why didn't I say that? I got quoted talking about this nonsense, and I didn't even. Fuck. All right.
And the thing that chased me about Costa Rica is I left. I was on vacation there, and I left the day before it hit, and the consulting opportunity just went out the window.
Yeah. That's a little bit like self-snitching, much.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you just happened to leave right before it hit?
By sheer coincidence.
It just happened to be in the former Soviet Union right before its collapse, but like nobody's pointing any fingers at me, but that's
I don't want to tell you about my Berlin vacation, but it was fucking close.
On those inspiring notes.
Yeah, well, Dave is bringing up a good point that I want to segue into, which is that the U.S. is not only is like all this weird stuff happening with ransomware versus nations, and you know, as we talked about, like ransomware has these missed opportunities of things they could have done. Like missed opportunities, the U.S. is not doing anywhere near enough to establish itself as like a cyber powerhouse by like helping, I don't know, Costa Rica, who's been hit by ransomware. It would be pretty useful for the US to now come and be like, hey, as like the preeminent cyber power in the world, we will assist you with our like cybers. And they could just donate all their cybers, you know?
Can I offer an alternate hypothesis there? Because we don't know, right? And I will tell you, having worked in government, when we go to commercial industry and go, hey, we'd like to help you, often the answer is no, thank you. We don't want you in our systems. It could very well have happened. And we don't know that the US offered and Costa Rica went, yeah, you know what? We're not comfortable with your NSA and CIA bubbas coming down and, you know, touching our networks.
That's just fucking silly.
That I'm not aware of. Like, does the CIA be doing anything in Latin America?
You know,
Panama.
Let me get my tinfoil hat. We can discuss it, but
we do this every call where we have to go down that CIA and Latin America nonsense. Or it's over. All right. We wish they would come back at this point.
But the point being, right, it's entirely feasible that we don't know that we offered and Costa Rica went, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We'll deal with it. We'll contract out with somebody.
Well,
let me annoy you even more, Pablo. Why aren't we doing it even if they don't want it? Right? Like, so a book came out recently on persistent engagement. You may have heard of it.
Transition. That's in the doc too.
Part of persistent engagement is helping people without them knowing.
Okay.
Right? Like,
so you're going to make me throw furniture, Dave, which I think was your intent, right? So why aren't we doing it anyway? Let me start out by being a good patron and say, well, we don't know because there are top men in dark places working on this. Top people, right? Realistically, here's my hypothesis. Let me anger the people right down the road at Fort Meade, because US DoD that has the capability and the authority working with the intelligence community still doesn't believe that cyber is important. They just don't. They don't do it, right? Ostensibly, they have a hunt forward mission, right? And they're doing, bad things to bad people and good things for good people. I think US DoD just they still don't get cyber, because that organization is driven by kinetic warfighters that are still wishing for the days of open tank combat in the clear fields of Western Europe. That's why.
Well,
I've got
so,
good news for them, by the way.
Eastern Europe at best, right?
Well, ostensibly, we're not the attackers, right? So we would wait for them to like come into Western Europe, then we push them all the way back to the ocean. But yes.
so
Okay.
one, it would be DoD to be offering that kind of assistance, and two, DoD isn't a monolith in terms of their like grip on the cybers, right? You've got different, sections of DoD that have some offensive capability, but you also have people who embraced hack the Pentagon like half a dozen years ago, right? And so it's not that DoD is a monolith that doesn't care, but I also don't think it would be DoD to go and offer help. Honestly, to somebody's earlier point, even the United States, the states and local governments refuse the federal government's help in a lot of situations. So I don't think it's like a realistic path for us to be wondering about like why we're not like one resourced even to offer other countries material assistance.
Does
Yeah,
Costa Rica want the help? Let me start peeling this in a different direction, right? Like because we have advanced a series of different arguments that don't work with each other, right? Like there's offering help, there's helping them anyways. Totally different things, and that is actually a pretty interesting idea, but very different topic. Then there's what is happening in Costa Rica around this situation, and to be honest, I am completely incompetent. I couldn't name the president of Costa Rica, so I have no fucking clue what's happening down there. But I'm dead sure that this situation is not as clear and smooth as Colgate got hit by ransomware. Colgate has a clear incentive to not be hit by ransomware, and they have an operational incentive to keep production of toothpaste going uninterrupted. Costa Rica and the Ministry of Finance getting hit and not paying a bunch of the people who work in the public sector, that is not a smooth situation a bunch of different ways, Right.
Well, one important thing on that is like this happened during the tail end of the last guy who was in power. Right, and he's been replaced. So this is the new guy in power as well. So there is for him possibly an incentive to make sure that things appear bad until he fixes them with his own magic power of competence.
Dude,
so
ransomware excuse for martial law would not be on my bingo card.
Oh.
But that would be pretty dope.
10,000 colones says that this is
But here's the point.
Which is like $14. It's the don't let a good
crisis.
Don't let a crisis go to waste, right?
Right.
I get to clean sweep. Not only am I leading the new government, I could replace all these idiots who allowed us to get pwned, and we're the laughing stock, and the last guy was terrible, and I'm here to save you, right?
That Venezuelan doctor really missed out on an opportunity. He just backed the wrong horse.
Domain expert, he's regional, he's got the skills, he's got a network. This is the guy that you want to bring in. He could have been head of the Department and Ministry of Ransomware.
So here's something that I do think is missing, though. I think that Estonia has a good policy for this, and I think NATO has an okay policy for this. What is the U.S. policy for providing foreign internal defense and assistance to nations? Like, how does that happen? Let's set Costa Rica aside. If Costa Rica were to have asked for help, who would they have asked help from? Right? How would that have gone? Who would have been issued to? Would the U.S. have even provided help? Right? Like there is no policy on this stuff. And I think it's high time that we had some sort of a policy, not just the United States, but internationally, on how would we do this?
We just talked to CISA, who then would talk to FEMA, and then they would, fumble the ball somewhere into the ocean, and that would be it.
So the most obvious is like there's a U.S. embassy. We go to their Department of State, gets it, and then goes to who?
CISA, who then put up a site saying top 10 vulnerabilities used to own countries.
No, so this is
Let
presumed
Katie speak.
that the US government has endless supplies of, cyber warriors that they can just loan out. Like we don't. And we kind of need to concentrate on shoring up at home, because as you know, the CISA list, the known exploited vulnerabilities list you just jokingly mentioned, that was meant as a list to get the federal agencies to apply those patches because the federal agencies were not applying them. That is how that list started. They decided to make it public. So you should also just take into account that, but most of those vulnerabilities on that list are like years old, like when the initial list came out, right? So we don't have enough cyber people to go around.
So can we circle back to the, hey, let's test this, people that do it in good conscience. If you start going through those known vulnerability lists and start publicly naming and shaming US government agencies that still haven't patched those, are you going to be prosecuted?
Stress testing the DOJ. That's a
Stress
good
test
one.
number one.
Yeah.
Huh.
Katie, you want to go first? I mean, you know the vulnerability disclosure process. I'm sure that, you're well positioned to take whatever blowback there is on that one.
Honestly, I probably am pretty well positioned to take the blowback on it. But no, I mean, I do try to point these things out and these inconsistencies in our own government. Like, for example, FTC published a note saying, shortly after Log4j, that they said, if you are lagging on Log4j, FTC is going to go after you. And look at the example we set with Equifax and the Apache Struts vulnerability. They settled, for, I think it was like $750 million settlements with the FTC. So they bring up that particular vulnerability, right? The Apache Struts vulnerability. Then if you go look at the known exploited vulnerability list, that specific vulnerability was on a list to not even get patched until like May this year. And this was, so consistency even among the federal government. We're at that stage where we can't actually coordinate our own cybers internally.
Well, if you pay attention, the only reason I found out what you just explained, Katie, about the list being for the purposes of essentially forcing the hand of other government agencies to patch was because if you paid close attention this week, they removed one of the vulns.
They removed the wrong one. They removed the wrong one.
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was the wrong one.
It was pointed out by somebody replying to, actually it was US CERT had tweeted it, CISA had retweeted it. Someone replied to US CERT's tweet saying, the CVE in question that you're thinking about that has stability issues actually ends in 23, not 26 or whatever, or 25, right? So it was this
is not the vuln you're looking for.
It's 25. And I did this whole thread about it because I'm like, okay, no shame on the one person that apparently that's their job, is to make this list in CISA. But two, everybody's saying, oh, this is such a great list. Everyone should subscribe to this list and follow this list. And I'm like, it's one person trying to make authoritative prioritization patching choices for who exactly? Is it for your organization? Because if you're taking it from the random ocean of advice out there, there's 50,000 patches you could be prioritizing right now. And you're just narrowing it down to that one. So
the
yeah,
people
that's
who love that list are the people who love MITRE attack framework. It's the people who nice little JSONable priorities that you can just blip around. Because let's talk about something on that front. And I've never had to patch for, run patching for an organization of 50,000 endpoints with legacy systems and all that wonderful stuff. I just understand that it's much more complicated than we make it out to be. However, usually those complications, as far as I understand, have to do with A, legacy systems, B, legacy code bases, or, the incompatibilities and problems that arise like this week, where if we patch this thing, we might actually have a service outage because the patch is shitty, because Microsoft has somehow forgotten how to patch things good. They have changed in the past 10 years. They don't patch so good anymore. But if that's the case, if that's actually the reality of why people patch one thing and not another, why the fuck are we running a list of like, these are serious vulns, instead of saying, this is a package of patches that you can apply all at once without it being a problem for the Windows XP systems, instead of like, patch this vuln and that one and not this one and the other. Like, what the fuck?
I know the answer to this one. Because I worked in the belly of a very large software company that had to deal with this, right? So here was the issue. There was a huge matrix for not just, backwards compatibility, but app compatibility across multiple common configurations. And here's where it gets tricky. When you have like over 1 billion systems to deal with, like a 1% failure in your patches is pretty bad, So one time they did their whole testing and everything like that. And Patch Tuesday came out and all of a sudden Korea black screened, like the whole country that was running Windows was like, and this was black screen, not blue screen. So this is a bad error. Turns out there was a Korean specific antivirus that was doing some undocumented kernel hooks that were destabilized by one of the patches that weren't tested with some like one, kind of Korean language application package. So after that, you can imagine how much more complex the testing matrix got. And there's actually a paper that was released about it that kind of detailed the languages and then the, different app compat configurations, hardware as well. So anyway, point is, in certain ecosystems, there is a reason why they don't force automatic updates, right? There's a reason why patches take a little while, but I agree with you, patch quality has gone way down from that particular software.
Yeah, those being two different issues, right?
Like, here's what I'll say about
the solution is simple, right? But in practice, so yeah. Sorry.
So here's what I'll say about the list of patches and patch these vulns first, right? Like, it's one thing if you're a huge, company with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of endpoints. That is not most businesses, right? Most businesses are small businesses with, less than 50 people, and they don't have, in most cases, a dedicated IT staff. And so in those cases, absolutely, right? It's like a Betty Crocker cake. Start at step 1 and go to step 10, and you're going to be better off, right? So, if you have a dedicated IT staff, if you have a dedicated SOC, absolutely, you're going to go through and you're going to prioritize. I certainly know my employer is not going to go through and blindly follow one of those lists. We have our own protocols, but I think in most cases, that's a pretty good thing to follow.
It just doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Sorry,
I was saying, except when they get it wrong. Like, so they pulled one that was actually being actively exploited by accident because they mistook it for a related one off by 2 numbers at the end of the CVE that's not actively being exploited. And I still don't know. I mean, I've been too busy to check up on them and see if they've fixed it, right? I haven't seen anything go in my email because I subscribe to their email. They didn't say
the time for application of a patch used to be like 179 days. I've not looked it up in a while. There's a reason for that. And it's not because I can't reach the computers. It's exactly what we were talking about with the new federal language. It's you go first.
Well,
right.
But part of that is like what I'm trying to reach in this whole discussion, same as the MITRE ATT&CK thing. The reason I was hating on the MITRE ATT&CK thing is it's abstracted in a way that doesn't make sense. Like, I can't go into a Windows Update panel and choose CVE 2021 this and 2022 that, but not this one, but not the other. That's not how the patches are like categorized. So who the fuck is sitting there with a matrix of patch to vuln and getting to choose this one, but not, sometimes they're not even bundled that way. So like, this is like the laziest version of guidance. And it does, you do get the sense when somebody like literally just like fat fingered a number and it's like, oh, wrong vuln to the entire like set of federal agencies and whatever, that it's not like they're really putting their best foot forward on this advice. Like same with the ICS thing where they're just like, do all these things that would break ICS. You're like, no, you just copy pasted the advice from non-ICS, please don't, right? That's my issue with it.
I think we need where's Alan Friedman when we need him? We need a VBOM, right? Like for the patches, right? When they tell me what's in the patch, there needs to be a vulnerability bill
Oh,
you know,
no,
yeah, what's being touched?
that's called Vex, and it's like the vulnerability, exploitability, whatever it is, and they're developing that elsewhere. But yeah, there is supposed to be an overlay of exploitability information, but that's not the SBOM. The SBOM is just the ingredient list. Don't get me.
Yeah.
Of course, someone has already come up with this idea, and they've already fucked it up somehow. So like, let's...
No, it's not standardized. That second bit, SBOM is barely standardized, but I digress.
No faith in it.
Clicking on a patch, to Jack's point, right? Like if I'm choosing to apply a patch or not apply a patch, like right there when they tell me what's in the patch, the CVE number should be there, right? I shouldn't have to click and make my way through another 60-page document from some behemoth manufacturer, right? Software development firm to figure out, well, you know, which of these CVEs am I actually patching by applying this patch?
All right. The Grug has rightly pointed out that we are past the 5-minute mark. It's actually been amazing to have Katie here. And I think in the tradition of Hot Ones, how about you just get to direct the next 3 minutes that we have left? Tell us what you're up to. Tell us what Luda's up to. Tell us what you care about. What are we not talking about that we should be talking about? Like, you're much smarter than the rest of us here. So like, please give us some guidance.
I love the Pablo's comment. I just saw it pop up saying we're much smarter with Katie here. That's nice that I keep me and the cat keep you on your toes. He's back, by the way. He's coming for the finale. So I'm speaking at Black Hat. I'm really excited. It's like the first time I'll be, you know, out and about in a long time. I did do one public speaking and got like Omicron and almost died. That's like, you know, yeah, that happened. And they say that, you know, your immunity doesn't last. So I'm planning to get boosted again right before Vegas. But what I'm talking about is bug bounty evolution, and it's not your grandson's bug bounty, because I feel like there has been a lot of opportunity for the bug bounty market to evolve and for, you know, both sides of the marketplace to evolve with it. And what we've seen is stagnation. So rather than, you know, one of my usual long Twitter threads where I talk about all the flaws in this existent market, I'm going to talk about some alternate configurations of reality that might get us out of this terrible mess that we're in and resurrect like the promise, you know, of the goodness of bug bounties for everybody, not just for the hackers, not just for the people receiving the bugs, but honestly, a market correction. So it's not your grandson's bug bounty, and that's what I'm talking about in Vegas at Black Hat. And
The
this
Bounty
cat
Queen
not
is
coming
coming back to fix the bounty mess that we've made.
Like sometimes you just need your mom to come back in and tell you how to clean your room, and mom is back. And I'm just like, you know what? This is messy in here.
So
yeah.
At one point we were talking about a thing that Dave pointed out, which was that bug bounties have basically outsourced a lot of security skills to other nations, taking it out of companies that are doing it internally.
Taking good American jobs.
Yeah. And giving it to people who can't immigrate over here. But anyway, point is, I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have with you when you come back, because you are obviously coming back.
Can we just have Katie as a regular at this point? Like,
Yes, please.
So you know how like
she wants to be up at 7 a.m. every fucking time.
Hour is crazy, but since I have my kids every other week, I could only every other week is the maximum that I could ever participate. So this week,
can your kids play with Dave's kids, and then we get you both at some point? Because like, it's tough, man. People don't understand the logistics.
Time zones, custody schedules. It's like modern life. This is what it's about. But yeah.
Well, we're at time. Katie, do you have anything that you want to close out with? Or can we finally let the Grug just like...
let the Greg do it. But hey, I just wanted to say thank you all for having me on the show. It's really, really fun. I might even do my hair next time. No freaking guarantees though. No.
Yeah, well,
this is
as long as you're here.
So, you know, some of us put our face on, is all I'm saying. If I take the effort, I think...
I'll just wear just a big scappy mask next time. You won't know who's talking.
Like the cat, you know.
I am not a cat.
Exactly. I'm ready to go.
Cool. All right. Well, that is time. Thank you very much to Katie for joining us. We've wanted you to come on for a while, and we finally managed it. That worked out. We covered a bunch of things. At least some of them were on the topics list, so that was pretty good. As always, remember to comment and subscribe and bell and like and oh, here we go. Is cyber good or bad? Please leave your idea in the comments. We're interested.
Should Costa Rica rebrand itself as Conti Rica and get out of this mess?
Let me know what you
below.
think in the comments.
Let me know what you think.
A big shout out to our sponsor, Katie, for making this show possible, as always, much appreciated. And we invite you to watch any of our other videos, which are similarly chaotic, but also interesting. And that should be it. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Scappy. Thanks, everybody who joined. And take care, guys. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.